Inspirational that I left that day. I'm a principal to school. I went back, I bought your magazine, and I started a lab this year. And I want to say to people who haven't done it yet, it's been transformational at my school. I get 39 parents a month to come volunteer. We just started it, so it's been great. But what I'm interested in now is getting outside people to come, like professionals who've created things or I've read in a couple magazines, but it seems a little difficult to make that bridge between our professional community and the schools. What would you suggest on ways to get that going? Because I think if our kids saw adults doing this,
absolutely,
it would jumpstart it a little bit more.
Absolutely. Well, you have a start with getting those parents involved. And I think part of it is starting with them and looking at what do they do. And it doesn't, I wouldn't always use the word professional. Because someone who knits or someone who does this as a hobby, I think it still applies. One of the things that Casey did, we did this kind of each year. We had like open houses, and we were surprised, like 150 people showing up, on a Wednesday night to check out the space. Some were parents, but some people wandered in. Someone who used to teach welding at the high school. And we go, oh, how do we take advantage of that? I think one of the reasons I started Maker Fairs was to try to draw out in the community those kind of people. And so, Dan has organized some, Sonoma County Maker Fair. There's some others. You kind of want to look through that list. Obviously, some of them might have kids in your school, but there's no magic I have other than that. But they are around, and that's part of the community outreach. I might suggest that maybe that's a volunteer role for someone. But, like if you did a school-based Maker Fair, don't just invite the kids. Try to invite parents and others to demonstrate hobbies. And I don't know, you might have amateur astronomers, ham radio operators, people that do model railroads. And, that's it, all accessible and fun. But I want to just thank you for the work you started there. And, the other thing is, I don't have the best ways of doing this, but I'd love to have pictures, stories from any of you about what you've done, because each of that, the fact that you got the parents involved, that you just started the lab, and when you say the word transformational, it's just that's what we're about. So thank you very much. Anybody else? Come on, you got questions. Stephen, you're mine. Come on, you're a shill.
What have you seen in some of other? Oh.
This could be dangerous. But.
This. Oh, just kidding. Dale, what have you seen in other places where they kind of fit in schools? I know you worked quite a bit to try to build it as a community effort and engaging and connecting schools and communities. But we're really looking at ways in which we can employ this in lots of different school environments, and I'm not sure some other things you might have seen.
It's still kind of early. I've seen a few groups that are trying to think about how to do whole schools, but a lot of it, I think this, this project make model, I'd really love to see. How do you get kids an hour and a half to 2 hours or some longer period of time to do this 2 to 5 times, a week? That I think is sort of the core thing, and I personally don't care if it bleeds into after school. It's like to think differently about that. I just feel like creating space. It could be. What was your space look like?
We had a classroom that was empty.
Yeah,
exactly. Our art room, and so now it's half Maker Lab, half art room.
Exactly, and it really wants to be this combination of art and computer lab. And shop class. Let's just start to think of it more in a general purpose way. And I think some of the applications emerge. One of the things I wanted to mention that I think is really something you can do that would be really valuable. Stephanie's actually heading up an open portfolio working group at Maker Ed. And I had the idea that one of the best forms of assessment for this is really a portfolio approach of kids sharing about the work, about the projects they do. It could be a video, it could be a documentation, it could be notes, a lot of different ways. But the core of Maker Faire is like getting up and saying, here's what I made, and this is how it works and what it does. And you ask them questions. And if we had a 2 to 5 minute video from each student about that, and we organize that, I'd love to see school websites post those videos. Right? Here's the project work we're doing at our school. It's real, and we can talk about that. The driver of that, I think, is just also community engagement. Right? People can see that. Here's what we're doing. But I think for the kids themselves, that you're also helping them make connections in the community, not just the local community, though. Kids are already doing this and putting stuff up on YouTube, right? We know this. And but Portfolio allows them to curate that and make sense of it. But last summer, MIT announced that for part of their admissions process, they were offering a maker portfolio option. And that means that kids could put up a URL and a short description saying, here's my project. That's huge, right? They're still going to care about academics. I mean, it's part of it. But they also realize that when they only look at math scores, they're not getting kids into MIT who are builders and makers, right? And they might want kids that are just purely analytical, but they're not getting enough of the kids who actually can do stuff. So when they teach a class like machine design, kids that don't have any reference to what those machines are, right? So that's I think a step in a direction that we're going in, and places like Georgia Tech, which is the largest engineering school, created a lab. They call it Invention Studio, and the goal there was for kids to have capstone projects, to be able to work on them. But what they've seen is that space has become a social space, and kids hang out there. For engineers to do social things is kind of unusual, so they're really excited about that. But it creates a community there of people who are doing these things. But what I've talked to them is, there's 600 capstone projects in the spring. Are those online? Can I see them? No, let's do them in class. So how do we get some of this online where, what happens online too is, especially in things like web design, people find out about you because they see your work. And then they say, hey, could you create a website for me? Well, if they see that you can make robots, someone's looking for a robot designer, you make those kind of connections just through the work itself. Okay,
we'll take one last question.
Hi, I'm brand new at this, so I'm going to plead my ignorance right up front.
Great.
Do teachers use this with their curriculum in their classroom for like social studies teachers or language arts teachers? Is there a place for Maker within that curriculum?
I think there is. I can't say that it's formalized in any way, of course. But, I'll give you some examples of, a social studies class in Sacramento made, they were studying like medieval villages, and they began to construct them out of cardboard, right? And use designs. And there's online designs for cathedrals and things that people will download and print. And so you could think of it that way. Down in San Diego, I saw a group, they were, I forget what they might have called it Poetry in Motion, but they, each student, it was like a big wall thing, and everything was in basically a gear. And they had to write a poem on their particular gear that fit into a larger mechanism. And so, they would crank the middle thing, and all those poems kind of moved about. So they're really, and that's just a creative way. And the poetry was cut out on a laser cutter. So, there's a lot of different ways to use this. What I understand, is a Common Core standards that again, I don't think we've done a lot yet, and just because they're new, to figure out exactly the connections. But there are kind of two parts to it. One is sort of content standards, and the other's they might call practice standards. And if you look at the practice, it's very much aligned with a focus on process. And I think that's what Maker is really about. It's not just that you can make something at the end and but what is your process in doing that? And again, that's math. That's how do you think about this? Why did this happen? Which can be applied to that same San Diego thing. They did a history project in a similar way. That each group had a different civilization, and they had to explain like a theory of decline or something for that civilization, and they created mechanisms to illustrate that. And so, you know, demonstration is kind of at the core of this. Today we use pen and paper a lot, but creating physical things, making things, can also be another way of explaining and communicating something like that. Okay? Yes, sir.
Talking about process, have you seen places where design thinking has been integrated into the making?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that often is more, you know, the process. I mean, Stephanie's was at the D school, and you know, they're close cousins. People often think of this together. There's a school, Olin College, which I kind of have a triangle, and it's sort of, you know, design, you know, engineering and engineering technology, and then sort of business. And I think design is usually the word used for the process piece of this. And I think the only thing I would add to that is what I want design to be experiential, not just a formalism, right? Not just like, oh, there's stages to a design. And when you look deeply into design thinking, you realize, hey, it all happens together. It isn't just, oh, now we're going to ideate, now we're going to create and test it. You know, there's a way of understanding it as a formalism, but I think it's really important to get kids to be aware of their own process, right? This is, you know, and that's transferable. And at the core of the making, this process thing is just iteration. And when I say that the one thing I learned in school was writing from a teacher who was probably not a very good writer, he was a track coach, but he made us rewrite, right? He made us write and write and write. And that, I think, applies to almost anything, whether you're doing code, or you're doing text, or whether you're, you know, building an object. Is you know, your first idea got you started, but it's not the end. It's not where you want to end up. Well, thank you very much for your time, Dan. I appreciate it.